The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up the short driveway, a paper grocery bag balanced in the passenger seat. I'd stopped for fresh pasta, a jar of olives, and a bottle of white wine I hadn't tried before. The trees swayed gently by the lake, and the air smelled clean, like a pause in time. I killed the engine and grabbed the bag, already thinking of the quiet I'd earned after the week I'd had. Then I saw her. Through the kitchen window, Camille stood laughing, her head tilted back, wineglass in hand, wearing the thick gray robe my husband bought me on our 25th anniversary. The one with my initials embroidered on the cuff. She leaned against the counter like it was hers. Behind her, people bustled and mingled, at least half a dozen I didn't recognize. Her mother's sharp laugh cut through the glass. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, still holding the bag of groceries like it mattered. Music was playing, something loud and thumping, not meant for this place. There were platters on the table, open wine bottles, someone's muddy shoes on the rug I'd woven by hand. I took one slow step forward. Camille turned, narrowed her eyes, and set her glass down hard enough to splash the rim. Her words landed like a slap. "Why is this pathetic leech here, leave?" Jason stood behind her near the sliding doors. He saw me. He didn't say anything. I didn't speak. Didn't move. I took one long look around at the people at the robe at the home that suddenly didn't feel like mine, and turned around. The paper bag shifted in my arms as I walked out, still silent. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Someone laughed inside. I didn't drive away right away. I just sat in the car holding the steering wheel, staring at the windshield like it might offer an explanation. By the time I turned the key in the ignition, the pasta had started to sweat through the bottom of the bag. The road back into town blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. My hands stayed tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale against the leather. Every turn felt longer than it should have. I replayed the moment again and again. The robe. The laughter, Jason's silence. The part that hurt most wasn't Camille's words. It was how easily my son let them sit there unchallenged. I'd bought that lake house with Daniel 15 years ago. He'd wanted a place away from everything, a small escape from the noise and constant work calls that never seemed to end. He'd drawn the first plans on the back of a diner napkin, grinning like a boy again. "A house we can breathe in," he'd said. After he died, I kept it. Not because I needed a second property, but because I needed the sound of the lake, the quiet, the space where I could still feel him. Jason had asked for a key 3 years ago, just in case, he said. I remember handing it to him, trusting he'd use it wisely. But the first time I drove up unannounced, I'd found Camille's friends sprawled across the deck, half drunk, with music so loud the gulls had flown off. She'd smiled, then pretending it was all a misunderstanding. I forgave it. The second time, she claimed she was cleaning the place for me. Empty wine bottles told a different story. I forgave that too. Tonight wasn't forgiveness. Tonight was something else, something heavier and sharper. By the time I reached my driveway, the last of the sunset had drained from the sky. The porch light flickered when I opened the door. I set the groceries down on the counter one by one, like the act itself might calm me. The wine bottle rolled slightly, then stilled. I didn't pour a glass. I didn't eat. I just sat at the table. Daniel built my hands, folded together, the silence of the kitchen pressing close. Somewhere between that robe and the sound of my own front door closing, I realized I'd been replaced in a house I paid for. And this time, I wasn't going to let it happen again. I heated up a bowl of soup I'd frozen last month, the kind I always made too much of, expecting someone would come by. No one had. I sat at the table, spoon in hand, the steam curling upward, untouched. I wasn't hungry, but I needed something to do with my hands. The list started forming before I realized I was making one. I'd helped them with the down payment on their house. Jason was still working hourly back then, and Camille had just finished grad school. They wanted something move-in ready, but their savings didn't even cover closing costs. I gave them $20,000, no strings, no expectations. Then there was the loan Camille needed to clear her student debt. "It's suffocating us," she'd said. "If we could just get out from under it, we'd be able to breathe." I paid it. $11,000 and change. I even made the transfer myself so she wouldn't have to see another bill. I babysat their daughter, my granddaughter, 4 days a week for the first 2 years. I rearranged doctor appointments, skipped book club, canceled trips, stayed up when she had ear infections. Camille would drop her off with barely a hello and pick her up hours late always with some excuse. And the bakery. That one hurt the most. Camille had a dream, and Jason said she just needed a little push. "It's an investment in her confidence," he told me. I gave her $15,000. She opened a shop in a trendy corner of town, painted it coral and gold, and posted daily quotes about female empowerment. It lasted 9 months. Last year, Jason brought up the lake house. Just a legal tool, he said, to help with taxes. He convinced me to sign partial usage rights over to him. I did it. I still pay the taxes. I stared down into my soup, now cold and untouched. The list sat in my mind like weight in my chest. I hadn't asked for anything in return. Not a word of thanks. Not a card. Not even acknowledgement. But tonight I wasn't thinking about guilt or obligation. Tonight I was thinking about what came next. I found the folder Daniel had labeled property, tucked in the back of the filing cabinet, beneath years of tax returns and warranty receipts. My hands shook just a little as I flipped through it, stopping when I reached the lake house deed. I hadn't looked at it since signing that temporary access agreement last spring, the one Jason swore was nothing more than a favor to simplify the tax situation. The memory left a sour taste now. Monday morning, I called Ruth Ellerby. She was the same lawyer Daniel and I had used when we first bought the place, kind, thorough, and the type of person who never rushed a conversation, even if you were the 5th client of the day. "I need to revisit something," I said when she picked up. "It's about the lake house." I emailed her a scan of the agreement. She called me back an hour later. "Marlies," she said gently, "that transfer wasn't permanent. It's revocable. You still hold the deed in full. Jason only has temporary usage rights. Those can be revoked at any time with a signed, notarized form." I exhaled slowly. "So I can end it, with one signature," she said, "and a witness. I booked a notary for Wednesday, but I didn't want to wait to reclaim the space itself. Can you recommend a locksmith?" I asked. Ruth gave me a name, and I scheduled the lock change for Tuesday morning. Full replacement deadbolts doors, even the keypad on the back porch. If they wanted to find their way in again, they'd have to break the law to do it. Before we ended the call, Ruth hesitated. "Do you want to let Jason know ahead of time? It might save some tension." I stared out the kitchen window at the trees just beginning to turn. "No," I said. "They'll find out like I did." Uninvited. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And the next morning, I started preparing for the locks to change. I folded the receipt from the locksmith into a drawer right beside my birth certificate and Daniel's watch. The appointment was set for 8:00 a.m. Tuesday. Everything would change after that. That night, Jason called. His name lit up on my phone screen just as I was settling in with a book. For a second, I thought, maybe, just maybe, he'd figured it out, that he felt it too. The shift, the edge in the air. "Hey, Mom," he said casual. "Camille's got a thing on Friday. Can you watch Avery overnight?" Not a word about the lake house. Not a word about what happened when I walked in and found strangers drinking on my porch, or Camille wearing my robe like it was hers to claim. Nothing. As if that scene had slipped from memory the moment I turned the knob and left. "I can't," I said flatly. "Oh, are you busy?" "I have plans." He didn't press, just muttered something about figuring it out and hung up. I stared at the quiet line for a while. He hadn't asked why I couldn't help, hadn't said he missed me or apologized for how Camille spoke to me. All I got was a request, and when denied, a shrug. I made myself a cup of tea, but let it go cold on the counter. My thoughts were already at the lake, already imagining the silence I'd reclaim when the locks clicked shut behind me. Not for Camille, not for Jason, for me. I laid out the legal papers beside my purse and made a list of what I'd bring in the morning. Nothing dramatic, just enough to remind myself that this was still my space. My key, my home, my name on every document. Let them knock. Let them wonder. By the time I went to bed, the only light left in the house came from the porch. I left it on. Tomorrow, I'd be unlocking peace. He pulled up at 7:42, right on time. I watched from the front window as the locksmith stepped out of his van toolbox, in hand, scanning the porch with a kind of practiced detachment. I opened the door before he knocked. "Ms. Granger," he asked. "Yes," I said. "Come on in." "Coffee?" He looked surprised, then nodded. "Sure, I'll get started on the front. Shouldn't take long." I poured 2 mugs and handed him one as he set down his tools by the door. It was the same routine Daniel used to do, offer a drink show. Respect, let the man work. Some habits stay, even when the reason behind them is long gone. By 8:15, the front lock clicked into place. At 8:30, the back door was finished. At 9 sharp, the new code for the side keypad was tested and confirmed. It was done. My house again, mine alone. I walked him out and handed over payment in cash. No invoice, no trace. He gave a polite nod and left without asking questions. That's what I'd wanted, just a clean job, no conversation, no judgment. Inside, I stood in the hallway for a moment, fingers brushing the new brass key in my pocket. There was no applause, no audience. Just quiet, just the walls remembering me. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my phone. One text to Ruth Locks changed. Documents signed and filed. Official now. She replied 3 minutes later. Confirmed. You're covered. I exhaled slowly, staring out toward the trees. There was still dew on the grass. A few squirrels darted across the fence line. Everything was still. At 12:03, Camille called. I let it ring. She called again at 12:05. Then 12:06. By the 4th try, I turned the phone face down on the table. It vibrated until it stopped. I left it there and stood reaching for a dish rag to wipe down the counters. Every motion deliberate, every breath mine. And when the silence finally held, I began to think about what else needed to be removed besides locks and old keys. Jason came by on Saturday. No call first, no warning, just the sound of his car pulling up the gravel drive and his footsteps pounding up the porch. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee reading through old letters when the knock came sharp and hurried. I opened the door before he could knock again. His face was tight, his voice already raised. Camille's family was counting on that weekend, Mom. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? I didn't invite him in. I just stepped aside and nodded toward the counter where the documents still sat in their folder. You should read these before you say anything else. He frowned, flipping through the papers like they were written in another language. I could see the moment the realization settled. His voice dropped. You revoked it, I did. Without even talking to me. Without being talked to, I said. For a moment he stood there, chest rising and falling like he wanted to shout, but didn't know at whom. Then his shoulders fell. He rubbed a hand over his face and looked at me. Really looked, but whatever he saw wasn't enough to stay. He closed the folder, slid it back across the counter and muttered, You didn't have to do this. Yes, I said quietly. I did. He left without another word. The sound of the car engine faded down the road, until the only thing left was the soft hum of the refrigerator. Over the next few days, I started hearing from friends. Camille had been busy online posts about being betrayed by family, about greedy old women who couldn't let go. Her words spread fast. I saw every one of them. She even tagged my son in a few little digital daggers wrapped in sympathy. I didn't respond. I didn't block her either. I let her talk. By the third week, the posts slowed. Attention always finds new targets. And I had something better to focus on: the quiet that came after noise, the kind you could almost mistake for peace. It started with the grocery bills. Camille complained to anyone who would listen that everything had doubled, that she couldn't be expected to cook on a budget like that. A week later, it was the power bill, then the rent, then Jason's paychecks. He'd been cut back to part-time. I knew it before he told me. His voice had that worn edge when he called, casual but heavier than usual. "We're in a bit of a tight spot," he said. "Just for a few weeks. Would it be okay if we stayed with you? Just until things stabilize?" I didn't ask if Camille would be coming too. We both knew the answer. "No," I said. "That won't work." There was a pause. "Okay," he said, voice stiff. I had to ask. I didn't explain. I didn't soften it. I just ended the call and stood in my own kitchen, the silence pressing in, solid and clean. My sister came up from Ohio that weekend. She hadn't been to the lake house in years. We sat on the porch that evening, watching the light shift on the water, the breeze soft against our arms. She didn't ask questions, just passed me a cup of tea and waited. "I used to think silence made me weak," I said eventually, "that it meant I'd lost." She glanced sideways at me but didn't interrupt. "Turns out," I said, "it's armor. Not for fighting. For keeping what matters." We stayed out there for hours, saying very little. I didn't bring up Jason again, and she didn't push. Some things don't need commentary. Some choices don't ask for applause. The next morning after she left, I stripped the guest bed and folded the sheets into clean corners. I walked the rooms, slowly checking windows, straightening the books. Not because they needed it, because I did. And when the phone rang again that afternoon, I didn't rush to answer it. I let it ring until the sound faded, and with it, the pressure to keep giving what no one even pretended to value. I started with the smallest things. The curtains had gathered dust from months of someone else's carelessness, so I washed and ironed them until they hung smooth again. The scent of detergent replaced the stale perfume that lingered in the air. I opened every window one by one until the rooms breathed again. The painting of Daniel had been tucked behind a cabinet, the frame slightly chipped at the corner. I rehung it in its rightful place above the fireplace. The colors caught the light just the way they used to when he'd sit there reading the paper, pretending not to notice me watching him. I replaced the worn cushions, folded the extra blankets, and threw out the things Camille had left behind. Cheap candles, plastic wine glasses, a chipped mug that said, "Boss Lady." They clattered into the bin without ceremony. By noon, the house felt lighter. I brewed coffee and sat on the porch with my favorite book, the one I never finished after Daniel passed. The lake shimmered in the distance. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. My phone buzzed beside me. Camille's name lit the screen. I let it ring once, then again, before answering. "Marlise," she began, her tone tight and forced. "I think we should talk. There's a way we could make this work, a mutual solution. It doesn't have to stay." I hung up before she finished. The quiet afterward felt almost sacred. I set the phone face down on the table and stood. The broom was leaning against the porch rail where I'd left it earlier. I swept slowly, careful not to miss the small leaves caught in the slats. When I was done, I folded my blanket over the back of the chair, smoothed the fabric flat, and sat back down. The sun was slipping lower, gilding the edges of the water. I picked up my book again and read the same line twice, before realizing I wasn't reading at all. I was simply sitting in the place I'd fought to reclaim, and it was finally quiet enough to stay. It was late October when Jason showed up. The leaves had turned and started to fall in earnest, crisping under his tires as he pulled into the gravel drive. I watched from the front window, not hiding, but not moving either. He got out slowly, holding a medium-sized box, the kind you'd use for books or shoes. He didn't knock right away, just stood on the porch like someone unsure which version of himself would be welcome. When I opened the door, he didn't smile. His face looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. He held the box out without a word. "She asked me to drop these off," he said. "Stuff she left behind." I nodded and took the box. It was lighter than I expected. He didn't turn to leave, just stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes on the floorboards between us. "I should have stopped her," he said finally. I looked at him for a long moment. "But you didn't." His eyes flinched barely, but he didn't argue. He didn't ask to come in. Maybe he knew better now. Maybe he understood that some doors once closed don't open the same way again. I waited until he turned and walked back to the car. No wave, no promise to call. Just the sound of the engine fading down the road. Inside, I set the box in the hallway closet without opening it. Then I returned to my chair by the window. The book was still where I'd left it, pages slightly curled from the lake breeze. I picked it up and read not because I needed distraction, but because I finally had the space for it again. The light changed slowly across the floor. The only sound was the rustling of wind through the trees and the soft creak of the old wood beneath me. It wasn't happiness exactly. It wasn't triumph, but it was mine.